Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I am your host, Nelson, here on this very beautiful, wonderful, perfect Wednesday afternoon. I apologize for starting this segment a little bit, or the podcast late. Same thing that happened yesterday. It wasn't a family emergency this time. This time I got held up in a meeting, so I apologize to all of you guys for that. I'll try to be a little bit more punctual, but I mean, it's a fantastic day over here in New York. Fantastic. The Knicks, they recently acquired Mikal Bridges in a trade between the Brooklyn Nets, and I'm going to talk all about that in this first segment because I am extremely happy. I am a Nets fan, but I'll explain why I'm happy. Hold on, let me just turn on this light real quick. There we go. And this trade, I wasn't expecting this trade. And I genuinely was not expecting the Nets to want to do this. So we're going to talk a little bit about that in the first segment. Then in the second segment, we are going to talk about how the Houston Rockets are, they seem to be really interested in acquiring Kevin Durant and Jimmy Butler. I'm not sure if they're going to acquire them both at the same time or if they're just going to acquire one of them. But I'm going to talk a little bit about that in the second segment. Then in the third segment, we are going to talk about the Golden State Warriors and how they're ready to offer Paul George a max as well as trade for him. So we're just going to talk a little bit about that as well. And then in the fourth segment, since, the NBA draft is coming up, I'm going to talk about a couple of draft trades that could possibly happen. Possibly. Doesn't mean that they're going to happen. It's just possible. So we also have a fifth segment that I'd like to reveal at the end of the fourth segment, so be sure to stay tuned. Before I begin, I'd like to remind everybody to please go ahead, use the link in the description to get your comments recognized, or the link displayed below the ticker on every single show segment. That is GSMCpodcast.net. It really helps the show, makes the show much more interactive between myself and you guys. Once again, the link is GSMCpodcast.net. And with that out of the way, let's go right ahead and let's talk about this amazing news. It's a glorious day here in New York. The Brooklyn Nets, they've officially sacrificed themselves. They sacrificed their season just so that a New York team can be successful and prosper in this new light of the Celtics winning the championship. New York as a city must have been like, all right, okay, so these Celtics, they won. Get this. We can't have this. So now the Knicks, they seem to be competing as to to try and match up between the Celtics and the that's really what this trade entails. I'm just going to go ahead and pull up the trade details because there's a lot of picks that were traded as well. Hold on just a second, because not only was Bogdanovich trade Bojan, excuse me, I always mix up those two, but not only was he dealt with in the trade, but the Knicks also ended up sending 4 unprotected picks: 2025, 2027, 2029, and 2031, and a 2025 protected Milwaukee first round pick, a 2028 unprotected pick swap, a 2025 second round pick, and a 2026 second round pick. Actually, no, 2025 second round pick. That was what was traded for Mikal Bridges, and also a 2026 second round pick. So the Nets, they also gave up their 2026 second round pick in exchange for Mikal Bridges, but they got a lot in return. They got Bojan and they got the rest of those unprotected picks. And another thing that the Brooklyn Nets ended up doing is they ended up engaging in a trade with Houston, which essentially gave them all of their picks back, the picks that they lost while they were doing the trades with Kevin Durant and things of that nature. So they ended up getting all of their picks back. So they're committed to a full rebuild, which is what I've been praying and I've been screaming to the mountaintops for the longest time. I wanted them to rebuild. I didn't want them to try again with Mikal Bridges. I actually wanted this trade to happen because it would be suitable for both teams. The Knicks, they would get the Villanova squad back together. Jalen Brunson, DiVincenzo, Josh Hart, and Mikal Bridges. They all played on Villanova together, and they all won a championship together. So this right here is, I think, this is a team that is good enough and is able to compete against the Celtics as of right now. However, there are still some more questions that need to be answered in this free agency with the Knicks. So based off of this trade and after this trade, I think that Julius Randle's time in New York is done. I don't think Julius Randle is going to be a New York Knick anymore. I think the Knicks are going to end up trading him to try and get either other role players or maybe get other picks as well. I'm not entirely sure what direction they're going to go with this, but I think that they're going to get rid of Randle. It makes no sense to keep Randle on the team with the chemistry that the Villanova boys have now. And not only that, the Knicks, they also have to re-sign OG Anunoby. And re-signing OG Anunoby and, keeping Julius Randle while also adding on Mikal Bridges, that's a lot. And they don't want to end up being in that first apron or that second apron. I mean, unless they're in they could end up being in the first apron, but going into that second apron, they don't want to really be in that situation. But if they were to trade Randle, then I have a feeling that they're able to capitalize on having a deep bench as well as being able to still have some other players. Even though Thibs, he barely plays the bench and he barely allows any of the starters to sit out in a lot of the games. During the regular season, I don't think that's going to... I think they may or may not have learned from their mistakes. Again, this is still the Knicks, and the Knicks are notorious for not learning from their past mistakes. So maybe they learned from their past mistakes and they're trying to... at least during the regular season, they'll allow a lot of these players to rest, just a little bit. 46 minutes, I understand that Josh Hart wants to play 46 minutes, but that is a lot of time. 82 games, 46 minutes, it's a lot of playing, and it's not really that safe. I mean, I'm all for the players playing every single game, yes, but take a breather sometimes. We need you we need you healthy eventually when the games are going to matter a lot more than this. So just take it easy. But I think that Julius Randle, his time is done, and now the Knicks, they have to re-sign OG Anunoby by any means possible. And they also have to get Isaiah Hartenstein back as well. But because this roster, that if they have Jalen, if they have DiVincenzo, if they have Josh Hart, most likely he might come off the bench. I think Josh Hart is probably going to be the one that comes off the bench, but depending on how the lineups go and how the rotations are going to go, I believe that this is a very solid lineup, and this lineup can eventually beat. Actually, you could put Josh Hart at the sixth man. You could put DiVincenzo at the sixth man. Depends on who you go up against in the playoff series, but I think that this roster that they have accumulated now has enough pieces to be able to compete against the Boston Celtics and their lineup that they have, because Jalen Brunson, while he is going to be the weakest defender in the starting rotation, his offense more than makes up for it. He's going to be matched up against Drew, and then between DiVincenzo and Josh Hart, he's going to be matched up against Derek White. But again, it's depending on the angle that you go. If you want to go with much more scoring options, then you can put in Jalen and DiVincenzo. But if you want to work on if you want to have a defender at the guard position, because there might be a starting guard that is going to be very good, and you don't want Jalen matching up against that, you can put Josh Hart in the starting lineup and have Josh Hart guard whichever big man is, well, not big man, pardon me, whichever one of those guards is going to be in that starting rotation. You could even put Mikal Bridges coming off the bench and being that other scoring option when Jalen Brunson decides to is sitting out. You could do so many things with this lineup, and it's really really difficult to ultimately determine a good enough starting lineup with all of these guys in the starting lineup, because I think one of the Villanova guys is going to have to come off the bench, and because then the matchups would be better when going up against the Boston Celtics, because then Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, the two main players on the Boston Celtics, they're most likely going to be guarded by Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby, and they're both incredibly competent defenders. They both have the height, they have the length that they need in order to guard both of those players. And I think those matchups are very, very well suited for the Knicks. And if there's any team that can compete against the Celtics, it's going to be the Knicks next year, along with the Milwaukee Bucks. The Milwaukee Bucks, as long as they have Giannis, they're always going to be a competing team. And I mean, that's my opinions on this move. Like, really, it's a move meant to counter the Boston Celtics. Like, this is what I see in the move. Now all that's left is winning time. I mean, the Nets, they sacrificed their entire future. Well, not really their entire future. Honestly, they just sacrificed their player and a good season now so that the Knicks can win and beat the Celtics in the future. So that's that's what I see this move as well. And I'm very hopeful for this season with the Knicks. And as a Nets fan, yay, tanking! Because they haven't, obviously, they're most likely going to win every single game, but it's like trading away your best player. It means that you're going into a full rebuild, and that implies a little bit of tanking. I'm not saying that they're going to intentionally lose every game, but they're not in a competing state. They're just in a rebuilding state, and it's like, yay, tank. So that's all that I have to say on this about this first segment. So now we will go ahead and go into the second segment, where I talk a little bit about Kevin Durant and Jimmy Butler, as the Houston Rockets have expressed some interest in acquiring them via trade. So I will be right back after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. Some losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
And we are back with the second segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this second segment, we are going to be talking a little bit about a surprise in the NBA. My personal opinion, I find this as very surprising, as the Houston Rockets are interested in trying to, it seemed like at first they are interested in trying to trade for Kevin Durant. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about that. But before I begin, I'd like to remind everybody to please go ahead and use the link in the description to get your comments recognized, or the link displayed below the ticker on every single show segment. That is GSMCpodcast.net. Really helps the show, makes the show much more interactive between myself and you guys. Once again, the link is GSMCpodcast.net. And with that out of the way, we can go right ahead and talk about Kevin Durant and, the possibility of him joining the Houston Rockets, or, the Houston Rockets possibly, trading for Kevin Durant, because, when I say Kevin Durant is joining a team, a lot of people might mistaken that for Kevin Durant is going to sign with another team, because, he is essentially the, you know what, I'm not even going to say what I want to say, but he hops around from team to team. He really does. He loves doing that. And one of the things that he he loves to go to competing teams. So I'm honestly very surprised that the Houston Rockets are actually trying to trade for him, knowing that Kevin Durant wants to be on super teams and teams that are competing. Like, I mean, I'm not calling this Phoenix Suns team, a super team, but they do have two other All-Stars that are incredibly talented, and Kevin Durant has literally never been in a situation where he hasn't played with two other All-Stars. Literally never. Now, aside for the one time with the Brooklyn Nets, where it's like, he had just Kyrie Irving, and they just had that was still a very formidable team. Like, as much as as it pains me to bring up the past and the mistakes and the tragedies and the horrors of Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving era, most of the time he's had two other All-Stars. But and even on that Brooklyn Nets team, the Brooklyn Nets on that team had 3 All-Stars and 4 Hall of Famers, and Kevin Durant was a part of that. So the Houston Rockets being interested in him, honestly, very, very, I'm intrigued, because, how are they going to be able to get Kevin Durant if they don't have another star to coincide with him? Because he's not going to be happy when he's in a situation where he can't win the easiest way possible. I know it sounds like I'm talking down on KD, but I genuinely feel like that's the mentality that he's at. I genuinely think he just wants the easy way out in every single time. Because if he didn't want the easy way out, why did he decide to join the Golden State Warriors all those years ago? Why? He is actually, fun fact, he is the main reason why the NBA adjusted their salary cap rules and why we have a first apron and a second apron. Because of him. It's all his fault. So, anyways, aside from that, I'm looking at this article real quick, and I'll bring up Jimmy Butler a little bit later, which is, that might be the leverage that the Houston Rockets will have in recruiting Kevin Durant, if that does even happen. So, Kevin Durant could be moved yet again. This is what the article's saying. On Tuesday night, the Nets, they acquired their 2026 first-round pick from Houston in exchange for the 2027 first-round pick via Phoenix. The Rockets also reportedly gave up their right to swap picks with the Nets in 2025, as they originally acquired the pick and swap from the Nets in 2021 as part of the James Harden trade. As of right now, Houston will draft number 3 in Wednesday's draft via the Harden trade, or they may not due to most recent reports. According to Woj, the deal the Rockets made with the Nets allows Brooklyn to control its own draft in 2025 and 2026 as it enters a rebuild. Meanwhile, the Houston Rockets are trying to position themselves to make a blockbuster trade for Phoenix Suns star Kevin Durant. Should be noted that Woj said the Suns have remained steadfast in wanting to make another run with Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal. So basically, they're saying that the Suns, they have the full intention of running it back with this big three: Bradley Beal, Kevin Durant, and Devin Booker. And based off of how the results were this season, this previous season, a sweep, I don't think this is the best idea. The team lacks a lot of depth, and the team also lacks a lot of defense. Literally, the three best players on the team are known as scorers, not defenders. On top of that, the way that they score is a very inefficient way of scoring. Like, I mean, I don't want to say that the way that they play is bad. That's not what I'm saying. All I'm saying is that their shot selection and the shots that they choose to take, mid ranges, off the dribble, contested pull ups from the mid range area, they're all very inconsistent shots. And relying on those inconsistent shots, is exactly why Kevin Durant and most of his teams haven't really been able to do much in the postseason. Like, when he was on Brooklyn, him and Kyrie relied on those inconsistent shots, and they missed everything in the second half. They went like 0 for 18, if I remember correctly, when they went up against the Celtics in Game 2. That was the, oh my gosh, that Game 2, like, it gives me nightmares. And not only that, it's been going on. Excuse me. I don't know what that was, but while Kevin Durant has been on Phoenix, that's been the shot that they've been looking for. And, in his first year with Phoenix, they ended up losing to the Denver Nuggets because they couldn't hit any of the shots that we usually see them take because they're so inefficient. Same thing happened this year, where they couldn't get their offense going, and because they lack the defense, they ended up getting swept. It's really a flip of the coin. You either play well or you don't play well, and you not having defense to sort of back you up and help you sets them back a lot. So, looking more into this article, this is a quote from Windhorse saying, "The Rockets are interested in tempting the Suns to try and trade Kevin Durant now. They don't want to do this later. They want to put this on the table to see if the Suns would be tempted by it." And, despite, if the Suns are tempted or if they're not tempted, then, there's a good chance that Houston is most likely going to use these picks to try and trade elsewhere. Like, they aren't entirely focused on getting Kevin Durant. And not only that, I believe that's why Jimmy Butler is also on the trade block, as well as, one of the possibilities of, being traded over to Houston. Now, honestly, I don't know if this is I really don't know if this is really a good move. Like, I genuinely don't. The way Kevin Durant's career has sort of shifted ever since he left Golden State, it's baffling, and it's sort of like in hindsight, because it's like, when he was on Golden State, everyone was saying he was one of the best. Then he goes over to Brooklyn, and he has that phenomenal series against the Bucks, and everyone says he's like, the best player in the world. But then everything else just goes downhill for him there, and he's unable to do anything in the postseason because he doesn't have the help that he needs, and also because he doesn't play well without the help. And it's like, you can't be that guy when you're surrounded by those guys. Those guys being the 73-9 Warriors team. You cannot. It's just not going to work. And honestly, in this entire article, they don't really mention Jimmy Butler, but I did see Jimmy Butler as, a potential option for the Phoenix Suns. Well, not the Phoenix Suns, for the Houston Rockets to acquire in these next in this free agency, and in these trades and in the off season. And we'll see how it unfolds, but really, obviously, the big story is Kevin Durant. That is obviously the big story. And Jimmy, it is a wild card. Like, any team he could go for, but Houston has expressed interest, and I just wanted to point that out. So with that, we are out of time for this second segment. If you guys would like me to do, a segment focusing just strictly on Jimmy Butler and with the Houston Rockets, then just let me know, and I can do that tomorrow. But with that, we are going to go ahead and move on to the third segment, where we talk about the Golden State Warriors and how they seem to be ready to pursue Paul George. So I will be right back after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
And we are back with the third segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this third segment, we are going to be focusing on Paul George again because, he is one of the more popular players and one of the better players in this free agency and in the free agency market. So we're going to talk a little bit about him and how, it seems like the Golden State Warriors are ready to make deals with him as well as trade for him. So looking at this report, it's the headline for this is that Warriors are willing to give Clippers star 4-year max contract. And there's another header that I saw in another article that is claiming that the Warriors are also ready to trade him, trade for him. Like they're prepared to trade for Paul George and offer him a full 4-year max contract. So a sign and trade. Or like trade and sign, however you want to call it. But also, I completely forgot to mention before in the first segment that the Nets, they aren't done trading any of their pieces. So names like Cam Johnson, Dorian Finney-Smith, Bojan, Dennis Schroeder, Ben Simmons, and Deron Sharp, they're all names that have been circulating on the Brooklyn Nets trade block. So thank the Lord. Please get Ben Simmons off the team. Please. If that happens in this offseason, I'm going to be the happiest person on the planet. I'm going to throw a party. Like that's what's going to happen. But, anyways, let's go back to the to Paul George because he is one of the more famous free agents that are it seems like he's going to be a free agent. Again, we have no idea whether or not he's going to pick up his player option with the Clippers. And if he does, there is a possibility that, the Warriors will trade for him if he picks up that player option. And then they'll sign him, after he gets that player option. But we'll see how they decide to work it in this free agency. Have no idea, what's going to happen. And chances are he might just stay with the Clippers. Who knows? But he is looking for that max. Now, the Golden State Warriors, according to this article by Bleacher Report, reportedly willing to offer Paul George a 4-year max contract in free agency. Now, here's a quote from Brian Windhorst. To this point, the Clippers have only been willing to offer Paul George about what they gave Kawhi Leonard. 3 years at a little bit less than the max contract, and Paul George frankly wants 4 years. He wants a full-out max, and there are a number of teams out there, I am told, that are prepared to give it to him, who are prepared to trade for him. One of those teams potentially is up the coast in Golden State. So this is a quote from Windhorst. Now, honestly, it seems a little bit. I think it's a little bit. How should I say this? A little bit weird. Paul George being on the Warriors. That sounds weird. And speaking as again, this is coming from a fan that thought that Paul George going to the Thunder was also a little bit weird. But aside from that, seeing Paul George teaming up with Steph Curry is going to be interesting if that does happen. Um, it also seems like the Golden State Warriors don't really like getting younger players. Like, I mean, most of their roster is relatively old. I mean, Draymond Green, Klay Thompson, Steph Curry, and like most of those, like their best players are old players. And it'll be very interesting to see how these players they mesh with the rest of them and how Paul George is going to mesh with the rest of them in the in the locker room, especially with Klay Thompson. If Klay Thompson decides to leave, which is most likely what's going to happen if the Warriors offer Paul George the max contract. So we'll see exactly like how this free agency pans out. But having Paul George on the Warriors and Steph Curry, it really seems like they want to win, and they want to win right now, and they want to try and do it again with Steph Curry, and they'll be loaded with talent again with Paul George, Draymond, and Steph Curry. And it's like the Warriors they don't seem to want to go away. Like they every single time that we think that they're going to just be kaput for a little bit, they don't want to go away. They always that front office is legendary. The Golden State Warriors front office is legendary. I'm gonna stand by that till the end of time. They are one of the best front offices in this time and in this period in the NBA, without a doubt. And looking at the article and the rest of what's got to be said, George is limited to a 4-year max contract both with the Clippers and any other team due to the NBA's age 38 rule. The Warriors would have to reach a sign and trade agreement with the Clippers in order to realistically land Paul George, at least according to this article. So again, we'll see how this works in the free agency. But let me know in the comments what you guys think of this duo. Like, do you guys think that Paul George and Steph Curry, do you guys think that duo is going to be great? Do you think it'll be better than Klay Thompson? Would you rather have Klay Thompson stay on the team and be loyal to him as opposed to Paul George? Or would you rather just, say, let's forget about all that and let's try and win right now and acquire a great free agent? Now, really, the biggest concern, I've seen a lot of people in the comments when I did the previous Paul George video, they all were concerned about Paul George's age and just how that would affect him and his play. And yeah, I understand that his age definitely plays a part of it, but when you're trying to get someone like him, you're in a win now mentality. You're not trying to make a better team for the future. You're trying to win right now. So it genuinely doesn't matter the age as long as you win right now. And I understand injuries are also a major concern, but one thing that I just genuinely didn't understand is how, yes, injuries are a big concern, but most of the people that were in the comments, I believe they they were Philly fans. I'm just assuming because the conversation was about Philly and how they didn't want to negotiate in deals with Paul George. Joel Embiid gets injured every single postseason. It happens all the time. But they're okay with that. You're cool with your best player getting injured. So what's the point? Why is it such a big deal that you're acquiring a free agent that could make your team better? We understand that injuries are a possibility, but why? I feel like it's a little bit odd because yes, you're going to bring up the injuries now with Paul George, but you're not going to bring up the injuries with your star player Joel Embiid. I find that a little bit weird. That's just me, however. That's literally just me. So I think that with Paul George, if he were to go to the Golden State Warriors, I'm not entirely sure how that would fit. I really do think that the Sixers are a much better fit for Paul George and the situation that he wants to be in. And and not only that, Steph Curry, he also has a history of ankle injuries, and they do happen at arguably some of the worst times. So that also might backfire, and, especially with his age, because, they're both relatively old. It's a bit of a risk. Like, it is a bit of a risk, but it does seem like it's a risk that the Warriors are willing to take. But I think that I genuinely I think that the Sixers are a better move for him. I genuinely think that. But there is also the crazy scenario that he just decides to stay with the Clippers, but since he's really reluctant on getting that max, it doesn't really seem like that's going to be the case. So it really seems like he's going to go to a completely different team. So just wanted to bring that up in the news. That is arguably that is going to be the talk of the off season, where Paul George decides to end up. And we have somebody in the chat, stupid Laker fan. That's a funny name. This not a risk for Golden State, but East will be smart. Right, like that's genuinely like what I think as well, because the Western Conference is incredibly loaded with talented teams. I mean, the 1 seed and the 10th seed were like 2 games apart at one point. Meanwhile, when you're over on the Eastern Conference, you have a little bit more of like you can even the playing field out a little bit, because there's only, in my opinion, in the Eastern Conference, there's only really 3 teams right now that are able to compete, and those 3 teams are the Boston Celtics, obviously, the Milwaukee Bucks, and the New York Knicks. Like, those are the only 3 teams that I genuinely think are competing in the Eastern Conference. Every other team doesn't matter. Now, Pacers, yes, I understand they made it to the Eastern Conference Finals, but if the Knicks were healthy, the Knicks would have made it there. I will refuse to listen to anyone who thinks that the Pacers would have beaten the Knicks if the Knicks were healthy. Refuse to hear it. Refuse to believe it. Nope. And not only that, but the Bucks, I gotta respect the Bucks. Giannis Antetokounmpo, just Hall of Fame talent, Hall of Famer, Greek freak, and Damian Lillard. Like, while he wasn't the best, it was also, I did do a podcast saying that he wasn't at 100% because he wasn't training in the offseason because he didn't want to get injured because he knew he was going to get traded. So I have those 3 teams as competing teams, and I don't see anybody else in the Eastern Conference being able to compete against those 3 teams. Like, sure, Philly, that could be an option. Yes, I understand there's going to be a bunch of people in the comments that are like, oh, but Philly can compete with the Knicks. Oh, Philly can compete with Boston. No, they can't. Joel Embiid gets injured every single postseason. Joel Embiid has yet to beat the Boston Celtics in a postseason, and the Knicks just stomped the Joel Embiid out of the postseason this recent year. So get out of here with that. And let me see, what else? Oop, another stupid Laker fan in the comments yet again. Yeah, they need at least 5 teams competing in the East to pull out your checkbooks. So yeah. That's basically what I don't know exactly what you mean by that. If you want to go ahead and explain that, I could have a talk with you, a conversation with you in the next segment, because I do have to move on to the next segment, which is going to be talking about some potential draft day trades that are going to be happening, or not going to be happening, but could possibly happen as the NBA draft is approaching. So I might as well go ahead and talk a little bit about the draft and the possibilities of players being traded on draft night. So I'll talk a little bit about that right after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC. To access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
And we are back with the 4th segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this 4th segment, we are going to be talking about possible draft day trades. Before I get into the segment, though, I'd like to acknowledge a comment from stupid Laker fan. Now, that's his name. That's his name. Don't take that in any weird way, you guys. That's just his name. The East is not top heavy, so makes NBA boring. I mean, honestly, I think it's the opposite. The East is incredibly top heavy because it's like, only the top teams are going to be the competing teams in the Eastern Conference. So the West isn't top heavy, yes, but I think the East is incredibly top heavy because it's like, 1, 2, and 3, the Celtics, the Knicks, and the Bucks, in whichever order you want to put them in, those are going to be the teams that are going to be competing in the Eastern Conference. And I just don't think any other team can be able to match up against that. But that's just my opinion. So with that out of the way, we're going to go ahead and talk a little bit about some of the... Oh, and also, yeah, you are right. It could make the NBA just a little bit boring. However, there is more parity in the NBA right now. Like, I mean, this is the first time that we've had 6 completely different championships in the span of 6 years. Like, 6 completely different championship teams. So there is parity. Like there are other teams that are making big moves, and there are other teams that are doing what they need to do to end up winning. So let's get into this segment. So first we have, this is all like possible scenarios from Bleacher Report, by the way. So, and someone's calling me. Well, they're going to have to be on mute for the rest of this. So anyways, going into the trades and the possible, trades on draft day, we have DeJounte Murray. Now, DeJounte Murray, he's been on the trade block for a very, very long time. Like, he's been on the trade block for almost the entirety of the entirety of the second half of the NBA season. Like, he's been every team seems to be interested in him. So this trade scenario is between the Hawks and the Warriors. So the Warriors would get DeJounte in exchange for Andrew Wiggins, the 2026 second round pick, and the 2028 first round pick. So this is hypothetical. This is just possible scenarios that could happen on draft day. So do I agree with this trade? No. I don't think this is the best fit for DeJounte. And I also don't think this is a good fit for, depending on, whether or not, if they do sign Klay Thompson, like if they do get Klay Thompson. But then again, they're going to be put in that first, second apron, which is something that you don't want to be put in. And with DeJounte, again, I'm not entirely sure just like how good of a fit that would be for the Warriors. I don't know. DeJounte on the Warriors, it just sounds a little bit odd to me. And I'm not entirely sure if the Warriors are going to be keen on getting another guard, DeJounte as well. But let me know what you guys think in the comments of that trade idea. I'm not a big fan of it. I mean, I'm not a big fan of it. I mean, he does bring a lot more value than Andrew Wiggins, that's for sure. But I don't really think adding DeJounte to this team is going to make it a competing team. But that's just me. I think maybe Paul George would be a much better fit and a much better option than DeJounte Murray. But again, that's just me, because I feel like Paul George is a much better shooter than DeJounte, like a much better three-point shooter. And, I genuinely just feel like this would be a better move for the team. Like, I genuinely just feel that way. Now, looking into the other trades, we have the Spurs possibly, getting in on this action. Now, the Spurs, they could look to trade for... They obviously, they need a good guard. Like, I've been saying it from the beginning that the Spurs, they need a guard to pair up with Victor Wembanyama, because if you give him a guard that can give him the good looks, and all the things that, and all of the offensive opportunities, an unselfish guard at that, then you can succeed and you can eventually, you can elevate Victor Wembanyama's game just like that. And honestly, like, you want that point guard that makes players around them better. So here's a trade scenario that could possibly happen for the Spurs. Now, Spurs could get Darius Garland and the number 20 pick in exchange for Keldon Johnson, Zach Collins, and the number 4 pick that the Spurs have in the draft. This is a hypothetical scenario that I think is a little bit better suited for the Spurs, really, than it is for the then again, for the Cavs it could be seen as a win-win, but there were also reports saying that the Cavs, they aren't really too keen on trading, the main 4 players on their team. Like, they aren't really too keen on getting rid of Donovan, Darius, Evan Mobley, or Jarrett Allen. Like, those guys seem to be untouchable for the Cavs. But Darius Garland has also expressed, that if Donovan Mitchell signs that max with the Cavs, he wants to get traded. So if the Cavs eventually, if they just abide by the trades, and if they, by his request, and they think that they can get a good enough value in exchange for Darius Garland, then they might be open on trading him. And honestly, Darius Garland wasn't the first point guard that I had in mind with pairing with Victor, but if he is an option, I genuinely think, his passing and his playmaking and his scoring, while he isn't the best scorer, his playmaking, I think his playmaking will elevate having Victor Wembanyama on the squad. And honestly, how couldn't your playmaking elevate? Victor is so much taller than everyone else. You just have to throw the ball up in the sky, and Victor Wembanyama is going to grab it. It's that simple. And he is a little bit undersized. He is a little bit lacking in the defensive side of the ball. But if you're the Spurs, you aren't acquiring him for his defense. That's just not happening. So I think this is a pretty good trade for both scenarios. Now, there's also, the possibility that Donovan Mitchell gets traded in this offseason. I don't think that's going to happen, but that's still a possibility. And a team that's been very interested in acquiring Donovan is the Los Angeles Lakers. I said this before on a previous podcast that the Lakers, and with LeBron and AD, they want the Lakers to go all in on another star. And going all in might be on another star. The other star might be Donovan Mitchell. And the trade scenario would look like this. The Lakers would get Donovan. The Cavs would get Austin Reeves, Roy Hachimura, Gabe Vincent, the number 17 pick, as well as the 2029 first-round pick. Now, I'm sure stupid Laker fan in the chat is going to completely dislike this trade because it gets rid of Austin Reeves, Roy, Gabe, and their future with the number 17 pick, as well as the 2029 pick. I don't really think I like this trade idea. The Lakers have tried to go all in on a star before with Russell Westbrook, and it ultimately ended up failing. So I don't really think that going all in it's going to cripple them. It's genuinely going to cripple them if they try to go all in. But I guess, if you have LeBron and Anthony Davis, you really have no choice. LeBron's not getting any younger. I know, we like to make jokes that LeBron, he ages backwards and things of that nature, but he's not getting any younger. And the time to win for LeBron is indeed, it's right now. So next on the trade block that could happen is Brandon Ingram. He might get traded. There's a possibility that he could get traded on draft day to the Sixers. Now, since the Sixers aren't really interested in acquiring Paul George, Brandon Ingram is honestly a pretty good alternative. If at the small forward position. I'm not saying that Brandon Ingram is as good as Paul George. That's not what I'm saying. And especially not on the defensive side of the ball. But on the offensive side, Brandon Ingram is a very solid scorer. And the trade would look a little bit like this. The Sixers would get Brandon Ingram, and then the Pelicans would get the number 16 pick, as well as the 2028 first-round pick. So I think this... I feel like this move could be seen as a win-win for both sides. Getting enough pieces to be able to build around Zion Williamson, even though Zion hasn't really been that healthy majority of the time he's been around. I think it's shown that the Brandon Ingram, the experiment with Brandon Ingram on the Pelicans hasn't really been working. So I genuinely think it is time for Brandon Ingram to leave. It's time for him to get traded to a completely different team. But let me know what you guys think of this trade in the comments. If you guys agree with this move or if you don't agree with that move. If it were to even happen. next on the trade block, this will be the last one that I'll be talking about before I move on to the final segment. Jeremy Grant. Obviously, I mentioned before the Dallas Mavericks, they're incredibly interested in acquiring Jeremy Grant. They want to get that other star on the roster to help Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. So here's a trade scenario for them. The Mavs, they get Jeremy Grant in exchange for Tim Hardaway Jr., Maxi Kleber, and the 2025 and 2031 first round pick. Now, the Mavs have mentioned that they want to get rid of Tim Hardaway Jr. They do want to trade him, and getting Jeremy Grant in exchange for those picks as well as Maxi Kleber, I think it's a very good trade, because the Blazers, they aren't going to be winning a championship anytime soon, not with that roster. So with these picks and with Tim Hardaway and Kleber, they can rebuild their roster. I mean, I know Tim Hardaway Jr. is not exactly the type of player you want to build your roster around, but they can rebuild. They can use those picks to sort of get better players in the future, if that by a miracle that happens. And then the Mavs, they get a player that sort of enables them to be able to compete against the Celtics as well as the rest of the Western Conference, which is trying to improve as much as they are. So those are all the trade scenarios that could possibly happen on draft day. Excuse me. So with that, we are going to go ahead and go into the final segment, which is going to be about the NBA draft. Actually, I'm going to talk about all the previous number one picks in the draft, since draft day is coming, and this is relatively, at least according to all the analysts, a much weaker draft class than the rest of the draft classes that have happened before. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about that, and just where the number one picks are right now, their situation, how good they've been, how good I think they're going to be, and things of that nature, right after this short break. So be sure to stay tuned. And we are back to the fifth and the final segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this final segment, I am going to be talking about the last five number one picks in the NBA draft, because, there's a lot of circulation going around this draft claiming that it is going to be one of the weaker drafts in the NBA, and one of the weakest drafts in the history of the NBA. And I think that's a little bit unfair to sort of say, in my personal opinion, because you have to understand, we just experienced Victor Wembanyama, and literally anything compared to Victor Wembanyama is going to be child's play. So I think just the shock and the awe of Victor, and then immediately going into a draft where there's no shock and awe at all, it's I don't know, it's a bit underwhelming, I guess you could say, because honestly, it's like the Rams season when they won the Super Bowl. If you guys remember, it was they made all of these trades in a win now type of mentality, and then they won now, and then immediately after they won, it's just they just tanked. So I think it's a little bit of the same thing. Again, maybe a horrible comparison. You let me know what you guys think. But the last pick, obviously the last number 1 pick in the draft, Victor Wembanyama, arguably the most popular number 1 pick in recent history, and arguably going to be the best number 1 pick in recent history. There have been talks about him being better than LeBron already. There are talks about him being the best rookie to ever cross the planet. I mean, the fact that Victor Wembanyama has led the league in blocks with his height, just being a rookie, it's only like just signs to come. Like, everyone believes that this season, and Victor had a phenomenal rookie season, this season is going to be his worst season in the NBA. And just thinking about that is incredibly scary. So I think the sky is the limit for Victor Wembanyama, and really it's going to be down with, you know, his teammates and just how well his teammates are able to perform. Granted, like, he's just a freak of nature. He's so tall, he handles the ball like a point guard, and I'd be a fool to think that he's not going to be the best player in the future of the NBA. Like, I mean, he has everything. He has everything that you could possibly ask for in a basketball player. He has the dribbling, he has the shooting, he has the defense, he has the offense. There's nothing wrong with his game. The only thing that really is, like, you know, a problem with this game, like, and it's not really, it's an easily fixable problem, is his efficiency. And that'll get better over time, because let's face it, there are very few players in the NBA that can genuinely contest his jump shot. And if you don't think he's going to be one of the best players in the NBA in the future, then I don't know what's wrong with you. There were so many doubters in, like, the beginning of the year in the summer league. They were everywhere. They were saying, "Oh my God, Victor's going to be a bust, blah 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 blah. Like, he won't be able to handle the NBA." Like, get out of here. Like, that was just the hating. That was the haters' mentality. Everyone was hating on him. And, well, not everyone, honestly, but, you know, half of the media was hating on him, and now there's not a single hater in sight. So I think he's going to be by far the best number 1 pick in recent history, especially out of these 5 players. And that's a very bold claim, because the rest of the players that I'm going to mention, they're very, very good. Like, for example, the number 1 pick in 2022, so 2 years ago, was Paolo Banchero. Now, Paolo is, while he isn't very popular, that doesn't mean he's not good. I mean, he took the Orlando Magic to their to the playoffs, and he led them in to 7 games against the Cleveland Cavaliers, and they lost in 7 games, but it wasn't his fault. Paolo was playing phenomenally throughout the entirety of that series. It was one of the more unpopular playoff series in the entirety of the Eastern Conference, as well as the entirety of the playoffs, despite the fact that series went to 7 games. Like, while it was the most unpopular, I think it was, without a doubt, one of the best series in the entirety of the playoffs from last year, because it's like, it was 2 teams that didn't really have that experience, that was relatively young, and it was just a great matchup, and Paolo played fantastic, and he is also going to be a star. His game, I don't know, it's a mix of LeBron and a mix of Carmelo Anthony, like a little bit of both. He can pass the ball fantastic, like, for a small forward, he can pass the ball very well. He's also a fantastic scorer, and he's also a great rebounder. So I think he is a sleeper as the number 1 pick, a very good sleeper pick, and the sky's the limit for him as well. Now, the 2021 number 1 pick in the NBA draft was Cade Cunningham, another basketball player that's just a fantastic, like, he's great. It's just the situation that he's in is not so great. I mean, being on the Pistons and needing to and losing every single game that you play is not a great situation to be in, and that's just the situation that he's in. Now, one could argue that the only reason why his numbers are so good are because, you know, they're garbage time numbers, and just there's not really that much expectation coming in from him or the team. So that might be a reason why his numbers are the way that they are. But I'm not going to sit here and say that Cade Cunningham isn't a bucket and he isn't a fantastic basketball player, because I think he's a great player. Like, I mean, he might not be leading the Detroit Pistons to anything remarkable, but that doesn't mean that he isn't a great player in the NBA and a great point guard in the NBA. I think, well, like, great. I mean, he averaged 22 points per game, 7 assists on 44% shooting, as well with 4 rebounds. Like, I think he's a very great guard. Like, I think he's a really good guard. It's just his situation and the team that he's on, it's not really the best. So, unfortunately, like, for him, at least right now, he's going to be, like, the worst number 1 pick out of the last 5, in my personal opinion. Or at least the second worst. Just at least. Like, or at most. However you want to look at it. But arguably the second worst. Now, the next number 1 pick on this list, this was the 2020 number 1 pick in the NBA draft. This is Anthony Edwards. Now, he also is another player that he made a name for himself this year. He was great for a little bit in the postseason. When he was up against the Dallas Mavericks, he wasn't so great, but he was being leveraged and put on this pedestal as being the next Michael Jordan. And, you know, you don't really get those type of claims without being some kind of good at basketball. So he's a great player. I think he's just a little bit overrated now, just a little bit in the postseason. I think he was very overrated with his performances, and he didn't play well in Game 7 against the Denver Nuggets, but they still ended up winning anyway. He also didn't play well against the Dallas Mavericks at all in the entirety of the postseason against that series. But aside from that, he is still one of the great number 1 picks in recent history. So he's obviously like the second best, just behind Victor Wembanyama, in my personal opinion. But, you know, I could see an argument for him being the best because he's already proven a lot in these past few years with the Timberwolves and taking them to their first Western Conference Finals and only their second Western Conference Finals since their in the entire franchise's history. Last time they made it to the Western Conference Finals was when they had Kevin Garnett. And that was only one time. Now they made it again, and now it's Anthony Edwards, so, you know, got to give credit where credit is due. So if you don't have Victor Wembanyama as the best number 1 pick in recent years, it's probably going to be Anthony Edwards. Now, next player on this list is Zion Williamson, arguably one of the more famous number 1 picks at the time, 2019. He was considered another freak of nature when he came in from Duke. He was crazy athletic, crazy strong for his size and his height. And he's just in my opinion, the way I see it, his game, it reminds me a little bit of Shaq, and honestly Charles Barkley, now that I think about it, because Charles Barkley, if you remember, he was a 6'6" player, so not really that tall. However, he was incredibly strong, and he was very good at backing down defenders, and that was one of the best tools in his offensive game. Same thing with Zion Williamson right here, being able to just overpower whichever defender is on him, regardless. He had a phenomenal outgoing in the play-in tournament. Unfortunately, he did get injured yet again. This seems to be a common trend for Zion, just the inability to stay healthy. And that's really been the biggest problem with Zion and the reason why he is last on my list. Literally, injuries alone. Aside from injuries, I've said this before and I'll say it again, I desperately want Zion to succeed. I want him to be a great player. I don't want him to be injured. Aside from LeBron and Giannis Antetokounmpo, he's one of the best finishers around the rim that I've seen. He is ridiculously talented. He knows how to dunk. He knows how to lay the ball up. Like, regardless, he gets offensive rebounds. He's a phenomenal offensive talent. And literally, the only problem with him are his injuries. That is literally the only problem with Zion Williamson. The only problem. And because of that, because he's not really available for the team, I have to put him at last. As sad as it is, I have to put him at last. So it will go Zion at last, then Cade Cunningham second to last, because, you know, Cade, while his team isn't doing anything spectacular, at least he's available for his team. Like that's the only thing that I can really give him. And he's also a bucket. Then there's Paolo in the third. I think putting him in the mid-tier category is the best option for him, because I think, like, you know, he doesn't get all that attention from the media, meaning there's less pressure on him, but he's still a phenomenal talent and he played great in the postseason. Then there's Anthony Edwards, who is second. Obviously, he's been great with the Timberwolves, and he's been leading them to the postseason every single time. He's a phenomenal player, great with the media, and honestly a great personality as well. So we have him second. And then number one, hands down, it's got to be Victor Wembanyama, because he is going to be the future of this league. Without a doubt, he is going to be the best player in the future. So that's the list that I got for you guys. Those were the last 5 top picks in the draft. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that the number 1 pick in this coming draft is going to be as good as, you know, the rest of those players. But, you know, it's just food for thought, because it's like, we were thinking that the other draft classes were relatively weak. I mean, the one with Cade Cunningham, someone could argue was relatively weak. Same with Paolo Banchero. But they ultimately ended up being stars in the league, and they ultimately proven themselves to be very good. So, just food for thought that, you know, you can't really determine a draft class before all of the players even played in the NBA. So, that is all I have for the final segment, and that is it for the podcast in general, and that's all I got for you guys. So thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and updates. And as usual, please remember to use the link in the description to get your comments recognized, or the link displayed below the ticker on every single show segment. That is GSMCpodcast.net. It really helps the show, makes it much more interactive between myself and you guys. Once again, the link is GSMCpodcast.net. That is all I have for you today on the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am your host, Nelson, and as always, take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn ain't that